It's the story of, a father is very distressed that the son has turned from the faith. The son is, turning his back on the history of his people, and he's in real agony. And he goes to the Besh and says, "What should I do?" And the Besh says, "Love him more." And those were the instructions. Look, things were very tense for me. I felt it as a great burden and as a great weight growing up. I felt it was very difficult for me to see how I was going to be myself under the shadow of my father. He was it wasn't that he was a huge personality. He didn't domineer me, but everybody else was always giving him so much kavod, and they would look at me and they'd say, "Oh, that's just, Elie Wiesel's son." And they would have all these expectations for how they expected me to behave or be or what I would be interested in. And it led to a real strain. It led not only to, a desire for me to be distant from my parents for some time, but really more broadly distant from Yiddishkeit. So there was quite a while where I was really doing everything I could to remove myself. It's interesting, during that time when it was sort of very dark, when my relationship was very troubled with my father and with what I felt he represented, my father apparently went to the Rebbe for a bracha. Or I don't know if it was for a bracha or he just went to go see him. And the Rebbe gave him the following bracha. He said, "Don't worry," he said to my father, "one day you will be proud of him. Your son, will be proud of you. And when that moment happens, you'll both be proud of me." And that was the Rebbe's bracha.
You did have a very special relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. How would you describe that relationship? And what impact do you think that the Rebbe had on his life?
I think they were friends, but I think my father deeply respected the Rebbe and what he stood for, and the life's work that he'd undertaken. It's funny, I found an old video of my father out in, I think, Dallas, Texas, some Chabad events, maybe 30, 40 years ago. My father opened it by telling a story. He said, in every part of the world, what's amazing about Chabad, no matter some forlorn pocket of the world, somehow Chabad manages to send a shliach there. And you know what the first thing is that the shliach does when he gets there? He invites me to speak. So that was his relationship with Chabad. Deep appreciation for what the Rebbe and what Chabad were doing. And I think, sorry, you have another question.
No. Go ahead. You want to finish off that thought?
I was going to say, if one wants to think about the Rebbe and know what sort of a person he was, I think, again, we talked about how you can look at what someone said during their lifetime, you can look at their actions, but I think you have to look at the children of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe didn't have his own children. All of Chabad were his children. And I tell you, as I've traveled the world and I've had to make minyan for Kaddish or otherwise in far-flung pockets of the world, and there's always been a Chabad there to receive me, I have never met someone unfriendly in Chabad. I have never met someone pessimistic. I have never met a Chabad Shliach family where the table wasn't warm and open, and there was miros, there was conversation, and there was interest in the world around them. So I think you have to look at the children of the Rebbe if one wants to understand what an amazing person he was. You just have to look at Chabad, and I think the answer is there.
This is something that he said in one of the interviews. He said, "The greatest bouquet of flowers I have ever received was from the Rebbe for my wedding. He was nudging me to get married." And then he said the following, which I thought was remarkable, beautiful. He said, "I have many letters from him. One letter in which we speak about Jewish theology. 7-8 pages about theology. At the very end of the letter, he writes, and by the way, Elie, when are you getting married?"
Always. In all the letters that I have many of these letters, not many, but I have a collection of the letters that the Rebbe sent my father. And they're amazing because there's one of them where he says to my father, if you really are so committed to defeating Hitler and everything that he stood for, the only way you can do it is that you should have children and grandchildren, who grow up to be Jewish. And he said, I'll even forgive you if they're not Chabad. Okay, they'll be Vizhnitzer. That's good enough for me. I would love to see the letters that my father wrote to the Rebbe, but they're, I think, at 770. And I think there's a policy that so many people poured their hearts out to the Rebbe that those letters will never be disclosed. But I do have the letters, or many of them, that the Rebbe wrote to my father.
Would you consider ever publishing those letters or parts of those letters?
I don't know about. I would consider it. I would think about it.